Welcome to CT Politics TV. I am Joe Aguiar. It's 37 degrees at the Capitol under clear skies. My guest today is Connecticut's Senate Majority Leader. He represents the 25th District, the Norwalk and Darien area. As usual, and once again, welcome to Bob Duff. Bob, thanks for being here.
Of course, Joe. Thanks for always having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate when you come on here. We actually got a little flack earlier today from Twitter. I know that's one of your favorite places in the world, and that there's a lot of people out there who clearly disagree with you politically, and they sort of take it very personally. I feel like you got
I
a lot
have
of trolls on your page. I'm sure you figured that out by now.
I have the best trolls. I couldn't pay I couldn't pay for better trolls if I tried. So they come to me for free. And the great thing is that, I somehow live in their brains rent free all the time. I mean, in their lives revolve around my life. So it's really pitiful, but hey, that's on their part. But it's that's the way life goes these days when you're in public service, I guess.
Yeah, true. So before we get into, you've been up to a lot. You got a lot of stuff going on, and I like a lot of it. So we'll get into that. Before we do
Great.
that, though, I had former state senator Will Haskell on last week,
Hmm.
and we brought up Quentin Williams, and he came in right around the same time as Q. And I know a lot of the reps are just getting back into session this week. What's the overall mood? And my condolences on Q's passing. I know it's seems very devastating to the caucus.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I've known Q a long time, even before he was in the legislature, and his passing was just so, excuse me, just so tragic. I mean, coming back from the inaugural ball and, somebody going the wrong way, and you always do one of those things that, well, if he left 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, or this person just didn't do what they did, and the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and because you just can't believe it's true. But I will say that in his short life, he had a tremendous impact, and he probably did more than most people did and at that point in their lives. So, he's a man of deep integrity. He had a great sense of humor. Everybody talks about his laugh. I'm so happy that on opening day we had a chance to have a brief conversation, and that's my last memory of him, and it's a good one. So I'm just so happy about that. But I'm so sad about him passing on, and we're not going to have his talent anymore. But I think the mood now is to try and pick up the pieces and move forward, carry on his legacy and his memory, and just try to do the best we can.
I appreciate you sharing that. And again, my condolences to you and
Thank you.
everybody in the Democratic caucus. Now, the bill that you introduced about a week ago, I think, or so, we've talked about this, the January 6th, and there's people, Bob, who, for whatever reason, despite all the evidence they've seen in regards to what happened January 6th of 2021, aren't convinced or don't want to believe what they've seen, or they think the Democrats are making this up. But you've introduced a bill to make sure people who participated in the insurrection will never hold office in the state of Connecticut, which I think is great. But then part two, I mean, there's a bunch of them in Washington, D.C. right now that, we saw what they just did to this government a couple weeks ago just in trying to elect a speaker.
Right, right. And the great thing about this bill is that it's not only in Connecticut; it seems to be being proposed across this country, which is, I think, sends a very strong message about how we feel. And I think the last election that we had in 2022 really did talk about the fact that it's about saving our democracy. I mean, a lot of people voted about losing reproductive rights, but a lot of people also voted about not losing our democracy at the same time. So I think it's really important. And so what my bill does is so simple. It really just says that if you're convicted of insurrection, or you're convicted of sedition or any type of a felony, that you can't run for office, nor can you in state and local office, nor can you hold a job in city or state government. We don't want people who have tried to overturn our government in the government. I mean, we just saw this week where was it 3 Marines, active duty Marines, were arrested for their role in January 6th, and it's sad. We don't want that in our armed forces, and we certainly don't want that in government where people have the levers of power, no matter what it is, local, state, or federal.
It seems to me that the people that are upset by your introducing of the bill tend to be people on the right exclusively. Again,
Right.
this isn't even specific to January 6th. This is anybody going forward, even, right? Who would attempt to overturn our government or pull anything like what happened on January 6th again. You would think most law-abiding citizens would be like, Senator Duff, that's great.
You would think, and actually, the funny thing is that um, you know, back when this happened, and it was still the right was trying to turn this into a conspiracy. I thought they all thought that it was Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and none of and they were just bringing Trump flags in and wearing Trump caps because they were trying to throw everybody off the trail. So apparently now they're now owning this issue as to now being an issue that really was with and produced by and dedicated by and executed by Trump folks. So which is it? I guess 2 years ago it was by the left, and we were somehow trying to just put um, you know hide it somehow. But now I guess they're taking ownership of it because they think this bill now attacks them, which it doesn't. I'm not sure how anybody could be against a bill that says if you have been convicted of sedition or insurrection or a felony, that you should not run for office. So
I agree very much with that. Now, Fox News highlighted a bill that also came up. This one would amend the state's constitution to allow undocumented immigrants who are residents of the state to be admitted as electors for the purposes of voting in municipal and state elections. State Rep Juan Candelaria, who introduced the proposal, said he wasn't trying to get this passed as much as he was just attempting to get some debate going, pros and cons. Having a conversation about something and actually wanting it to be the case are very different things, yes?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, a lot of times these issues are brought up over time for a period of discussion. And look, I think I don't want to speak for the good representative from New Haven. He and I are friends. I haven't talked to him about this bill, and I say to folks, look, there's 3,000 bills out there right now. 200 or something will actually become law. So I'm not going to comment on every, Representative Smith's or Representative Candelora's or anybody else's bills that are out there that I haven't had a chance to look at. And right now, everything's in concept phase anyway. But I think it also speaks to the larger issue of the lack of immigration reform in this country, and the fact that we have not done anything to get folks out of the shadows on a federal level, which is, I think the Democrats had there been more votes in the Senate to overcome a filibuster, you'd see comprehensive immigration reform. The Republicans don't want to do anything because of the fact that it's the problem, and they want to keep it as a problem. They don't want to solve the problem because it's constant talking points, it's constant fundraising, it's constant symbolism by sending busloads of migrants up to Washington D.C. or Chicago or New York City. So for them, the lack of any kind of comprehensive immigration reform is great, even though it's harming employers. It has people live in the shadows. They can't fully participate in our country. It is they can't have bank accounts in some ways in certain instances. So it means that we need to have a larger conversation on this issue, and there's different ways to do that. And I think whether this bill gets a vote or not, it certainly starts the debate on what we need to do more on comprehensive immigration reform.
Again, it seems to me where people on the right, if you just have a conversation about something, then you guys want to
Right.
ban gas stoves. You
Right.
guys, it always ends up being, if one liberal Democrat somewhere in America even suggests something, that's the new liberal agenda.
Right. Well, I mean, the Republicans right now are got their hair on fire on something about M&Ms, which I have no idea what that is. They've got their hair on fire on gas stoves, which again, no clue what they're really talking about because nobody's doing anything about gas stoves. And they've got their hair on fire over other things that don't even exist. Like, again, we're talking about the critical race theory, which, again, nobody, it's not even taught in our schools, and somehow they've got folks, crazed about that. They got their folks crazed on transgender rights, which impacts such a small and few group of people that it's ridiculous that they're targeting that group of people. Let's talk about the big things. People elect us to talk about big things. They want us to fix our energy crisis. They want us to fix transportation. They want us to fix healthcare, keep the economy going, reduce college costs, build affordable housing. Those are the big things people want us to do. Let's take a break for 5 seconds on M&Ms, and let's actually focus on some of the big issues.
I did a bit last night on the M&M crisis here in America,
It
and
is a
Bob,
crisis.
I can tell you exactly the issue is they want to stay sexually attracted to that green M&M. That seems to be what this is boiling down to.
It's all about
It
the green
is.
one.
It's the green one. She
Okay.
wears sneakers now instead of sexy boots, and they're losing their minds.
Okay. Well, again,
Yeah.
it's that it's before it was the vaccines and the masks, and even though that's helping people, it's and again, this is why it takes Kevin McCarthy 15 times to get a vote for speaker, because the folks who are out there running the show are just very extreme. They don't share Connecticut values, and I'm not sure they share values for most of the country. I mean, here we are, we heard for decades when abortion was legal and safe in this country, and then folks trying to reverse that decision and say, well, it should be a state's issue. Well, now it is a state's issue, but of course, what it's become is you have members of Congress now on the Republican side who are proposing bills and laws to ban abortions nationwide. So much for it actually being a state's issue. It really isn't a state's issue. It never was a state's issue. Now you've got congressmen who are saying that they want to make sure that people can't cross state lines. I mean, what kind of a place are they envisioning that we live in this country? Are they going to have borders with gates down or something like that on the highways, which is of course illegal? What is their worldview here, their country view of where we should be? It's really dangerous. It's disheartening. It's extreme, and it's not where America needs to be right now. Again, you have countries who are moving ahead on a lot of different things, infrastructure. They're moving forward on their economy. We need to be making sure that our country stays just as competitive as it can be.
Funny, you tweeted in regards to the national economy, the GDP grew by 2.9%, 750,000 manufacturing jobs created, 11 million, a record 11 million jobs created, lowest unemployment in 50 years, annual inflation fell for the last 6 months. Your critics on Twitter pointed out Joe Biden did that. That wasn't Connecticut or the Democrats in Connecticut. And I thought first, I don't think they realized they're complimenting Joe Biden when they give him that credit, which is great. But then second, and you and I have talked a lot about this, Bob, over the last few months, but Connecticut's finances are in great shape. And our economy is in great shape, and the price of gas is down. And
right.
I'm not really sure what people are upset about.
Well, they're upset about the fact that there's success. And, I talked a lot about in the past about Republicans root for failure, because once there's failure, like immigration, then they can talk about it, but they never want to solve the problem. So it's rooting for failure. And Democrats like to solve problems. That's what then we can move on to the next issue and the next issue and the next issue. But let's not forget, even, unemployment is low around the country. And we've seen a lot of hiring going on in Connecticut, though. We have low unemployment, but we have 100,000 jobs that are open right now. We have a lot of manufacturing jobs that are open right now, especially when it comes to like Sikorsky and Electric Boat and Pratt and Whitney. There's lots of open jobs right now. I know Sikorsky is going through a little bit of a tough time. We'll see how much that impacts actually Connecticut, but they're building helicopters like crazy. And even though they may lose some jobs, they're still probably looking for other jobs, and especially when it's high tech manufacturing. So that's why we've got to continue to be the state that educates, that has good housing for folks, and that can fill those jobs right now. Because if we don't have those things, then the employers look for those jobs, fill those jobs elsewhere.
So another hot topic issue, obviously, gun control. Governor Lamont has suggested more gun control in the state of Connecticut. I know you stand in favor of gun control for the most part, sensible gun control. What do you think is going to happen in this session as far as gun control? Is that something we're going to see from the governor? Will a bill be coming forward? What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Well, I mean, look, we've had 3 mass shootings in the last week or so that we've heard on the news media. Two of which were in California, and it's it's sad, and it's devastating, and no state is an island, and that's part of the problem. And I applaud our federal government for our Democratic colleagues and in a bipartisan basis in the U.S. Senate for passing a bill. It's a small bill, and it was a first step. Thankfully, Connecticut has very strict gun laws. We can always make them stronger. It doesn't mean that we're taking guns away from people who can get who qualify or can legally get weapons, but there's no need to have AR-15 type weapons in our country. There's no need to have high capacity magazines that can shoot a lot of people at one time, which was one of those California shootings, had a high capacity magazine, I think, in Moon Bay. There's we need to have the background checks. You need to have the licensing. You need to have the training for folks. Like Florida, which is basically saying, giving guns away on every street corner and saying, "Here, have it. There's no issues." That's not what we need to be doing, because there's evidence and there's studies about how ways in which you can make your state safer. Now, Connecticut has some of the strictest gun laws, and our gun safety, and I've talked about this in previous shows, our gun crimes have gone down, gun violence has gone down. Doesn't mean we're perfect. We still got to do a lot of work in our urban areas. And a lot of that is from the ground up, and we've been doing that. And we still need to do more, obviously, because there's still violence in our inner city streets. But the problem is, I think, with California is that because they do have good and strong gun laws in California, is that this is what happens when you don't have national laws on things, because you have weak gun laws in states around California, and they can bring those guns in to the state. A lot of the guns right now in Connecticut that are being confiscated and are found on the streets in our urban areas, because people like to say, well, you have these great gun laws, but how can we have all this violence in our urban areas? Well, one of the reasons why is you have a proliferation of ghost guns, which are illegal in Connecticut. And two, you have a lot of guns that are straw man purchases from someplace else in other states. So they're illegally brought from other states, mostly down south, and up to Connecticut. So somebody may have legally had it at one point, or they could have legally obtained it, but then because of the laws are so lax in those states, they find their way up the highway, up the interstate into Connecticut and then to the Northeast. So that's the problem. And because we have a lack of strong gun laws in the country, it puts states, even like Connecticut and California, with strong gun laws, at risk.
It's interesting you say that, because Chicago obviously has very strict gun laws. All the guns that are used in those shootings are generally coming into that state from Indiana, which has some of the least lax or most lax laws in the entire country.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Now, you had tweeted something earlier this week too about crime. I think Mike Lawler had originally tweeted it, that cases coming into criminal court are down 20% from pre-pandemic levels. Reported violent crime in the state of Connecticut is down about 35% since 2011. Same with property crime, about the same percentage. It seems like what you guys have done, and again, I hear this from a lot of people, the Democrats want the criminals back out in the streets and they're pro-criminal. It's complete nonsense, and they see one crime, and one crime is clearly way too many, and it means you guys are failing them.
Right. Well, two things on that. One is that, remember, always, as I told you in the past, Democrats are the real fiscal conservatives, because we balance our budgets, we pay our bills, and we figure out a way to get it done. And remember, we have right now the largest rainy day fund ever. We're paying down our pension debt, and we have one of the smallest workforces in the nation per capita. Democrats have done all those things, and we've made proper investments in our infrastructure, in our schools, and everything else. Same thing with what you're talking about in crime. We're the ones who passed the criminal justice reform bills that put violent offenders away even longer, but took the nonviolent offenders and put them in, rerouted them into treatment programs, into non-prison like atmospheres. Because what ends up happening is, as we all know, it's pretty obvious. Once you send somebody to prison, the chances of recidivism is pretty high. If you deter them out of a prison atmosphere and put them into a treatment program, the odds of success are higher, the cost is lower, and there's not that chance of recidivism, and it makes our community safer. And we've seen that over 10 years in our stats. As a matter of fact, I mean, Governor just announced this week that another prison is going to be closing down. It's going to save taxpayers millions of dollars a year, and so we're not only keeping Connecticut safe, but we're also saving taxpayer money. I mean, I had a meeting of the National Conference of State Legislatures. I'm on their executive board a couple of weeks ago. And, I was reminded of the fact that Alabama, with their ARPA money, now remember, we spent our federal ARPA money on things like gas tax cut. We spent money on free museums. We spent money on for schools. We spent money for summer camp, for daycare, for kind of human needs. Alabama spent their ARPA money on building private prisons. So that's
Wow.
and by the way, their crime is a lot higher, and their gun laws are more lax, and they don't have the proper training for police, and the list goes on and on and on. So I would invite any of your listeners or my trolls on Twitter to tell me in what state, red state, that, and because in red they always talk about being tough on crime in the red states, you tell me what thing that they're doing is working that is actually reducing crime, and they'll come up with nothing, because there's nothing that they're doing that is reducing crime. We're actually been doing the reform that's reducing crime and closing prisons and saving taxpayer money.
Well, that falls in line with, actually doing stuff and not just complaining about it. So,
well, again, sometimes you like the problem, right? You want to have the problem because you continue to talk about the problem. Democrats like to solve the problem and then move on to the next thing, the next challenge.
now, incidentally, a Republican in the House has proposed a bill in regards to 830G that would add naturally occurring affordable housing to towns counts under the law. And my understanding is this would have a pretty devastating effect. They're very hung up on this law. I remember a couple of months ago, I had someone who had called in and suggested that it was the liberals that are the reason 830G is a failure and that you guys love it. And you explained how it wasn't like that at all. Can you explain what the Republicans are trying to do here and why it's a terrible idea?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think 8-30G is not it's not something that to hang, up on the mantle and say, this is the bill, this is the law that's going to solve the problems, because it's not. We still have a affordable housing crisis. We have a housing crisis in the state, like most states do. Now, we have to build over 100,000 units in this state just to kind of keep up with demand. And again, you have 100,000 job openings right now. You have many job openings, tens of thousands of job openings in Eastern Connecticut and electric boat with submarine manufacturing. You don't have places for people to live. They're not going to come here, and employers aren't going to come here. So this whole thing of affordable housing to me is crazy, because one is, are they saying that they don't want their senior citizens shouldn't have the right to live in the community, which they had their house, maybe they want to downsize, or we shouldn't be rehabbing senior housing? That's affordable housing. Are you saying that all the money we spend on children, whether it's in early childhood, whether it's in secondary school, whether it's if they go to a state school or UConn, and all that money that we spend, that we want that person, after that large investment, to leave the state because they can't find housing? Are we saying that when people are trying to open up a business and they can't find employees, that that business should not open because they can't find employees? I mean, these are all the kind of things that's being said, and it cannot be done by just the cities only. It has to be done by every single community. And so, people use 8-30G as some sort of like this big boogeyman from the state, when in fact, it's done some good. I wouldn't say it's some sort of panacea, but we cannot grow this economy. We cannot grow this state unless you have housing. And so it's not a chicken and egg. It's not, employees versus employers. It's employers will not come to the state of Connecticut. They will not come to the state of Connecticut if you do not have the workforce. And so let's take Electric Boat, for example. If you don't have the workforce to help Electric Boat build those submarines, they're going to go build them down in Virginia where they can build more affordable housing. And same thing with any of our other manufacturers. They'll just move those things out, or companies coming in from Europe, they're just not going to come in this area if it's just too expensive. You've got to have this housing. You've got to have it in every single community.
Now, you're also calling for more regulatory control for mergers in Connecticut, where Pura would have to sign off for telecommunications or cable television companies merge. Again, this sounds like a good thing, and yet there are people who don't like it at all.
Well, probably the cable companies, the telecommunications. I already got a little wind of that already, but they are a powerful force to reckon with. But I will tell you that, it was a law a few years ago, and I'm not sure why it got repealed, but it got repealed. And so all we're saying is that and we're just updating, also updating a little bit of our laws too on this, that says, look, if a company is a telecommunications company or a cable company and they merge, they need to go and get the okay out of the Public Utility Regulatory Authority. That's all. Right now, a lot of times people say federal preemption, it's federally preempted. The courts have been deciding lately in the state's favor, thank goodness. They hadn't for a while. But I think because of the fact that, a lot of these judges have they have internet, they have cable TV, they get just as aggravated as you and I do at times with these things. They understand the thing. They know that the federal government's not doing anything about it. They know that there's this hands-off approach by the federal government. The state's got to take some action.
Yeah, it definitely does, and I applaud you for bringing that up again. That's one of those issues that, like you said, it's to me it's confusing that there's people that are upset about it outside of cable companies, honestly.
Right.
But again, it seems like if Bob Duff is for something, that there's a lot of people out there that immediately think that it's got to be a bad thing or not in their best interest, and
right.
that's not how you're doing business, Bob.
No, I could have gold coins coming out of the sky, right? And they're like, how come it's not platinum?
Right? Before I let you go, I did want to ask you, and I know some people, again, the gun people, they get a little, right after Sandy Hook, there were people, my brother being one of these people, who has an AR-15, has high capacity magazines. Are we looking to get rid of those guns from this state? Do people like that have anything to fear as far as you have the gun today, but it might become illegal tomorrow? Obviously, it's been banned, but not for people who had pre-registered them.
Right. I remember that whole thing when we did the Sandy Hook bill about whether or not we would confiscate, basically, or have people turn them in. I mean, not confiscate, that's kind of a harsh word, but it would basically have to turn them in, or register them, I guess. So that we came down to, I think that was a big issue, and one of the reasons why it was a bipartisan bill was because of that provision to the grandfather them. So the governor wants to get rid of them. I think that's a heavy lift to be able to do that. We'll see where the votes are after public hearing. It's tough to do because, I mean, nobody's going to go door to door on these kind of things. Unfortunately, it was used during the Bristol police shooting, and that's one of the flaws of the law that we did. But laws are made by compromises and to get the votes, so nothing's ever perfect. But and who knows if those folks would have even turned them in if they had to turn them in. We don't know. So the governor has proposed that. It seems through media reports that I've seen, it doesn't seem like there's a huge appetite for that. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. We'll see, because sometimes when you have an incident like you did in Bristol, that can change hearts and minds for folks.
Yeah, Bob, that gun has a way of showing up at all of the worst crimes.
Yeah.
Definitely an issue. And I think something, again, my brother's a gun guy, but he's never been like,
extreme.
He's got children. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's a smart enough guy. He supports background checks, and I think most of the common sense gun control laws that most people are okay with in the name of safety, because that's really, at the end of the day, I think what we're all trying to do is make sure our kids will be safe. Last thing I want to ask you about, I've been hearing about efforts to close Brainerd Airport. How likely is that? How realistic is that look right now?
Yeah, good question. We actually passed a bill last year that created a study about Brainerd Airport because it's a little more complicated, as everything always is, than one would think, than just saying, hey, there's this airfield and kind of Hartford, and is there a higher and better use, and people may not understand all the ins and outs of it. Department of Economic and Community Development is actually tasked with doing that study, and we had the commissioner in front of our committee, the one I chaired, which is Executive and Legislative Nominations, for her confirmation hearing. Somebody asked her about that. So her testimony was that she said, we're in inning 3 of that study right now. So she didn't want to prejudice that by saying too much yet. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I mean, we'll see what the study says, and then it's a political decision with regard to that airport, whether or not it closes or not. I mean, there is definitely economic benefit to having Brainerd there, but for a city that is also 48%, maybe a little bit more, has a property that's not taxable because it has either nonprofits or state-owned property or other types of things. They don't have a lot of tax revenue and coming in. So does Brainerd represent really the highest and best use for a city that severely needs more property tax revenue?
Very true. A big thank you to Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff. Bob, as always, I appreciate your time as well as your insight.
Anytime, Joe. It's always good talking to you. I really appreciate the questions, and thank you so much for always having me on. Really great.
Again, it really is my pleasure. You're always so candid, and you come here to answer questions, and really that's all we can ask of our politicians. So please keep up the good work, and be sure to let your colleagues and all the issue groups know CT Politics wants them all on the show. So happy to have them on, and happy to have these great conversations. Thanks again, Bob.
Awesome. Thank you. Talk to you later.
Sounds good. I am Joe Aguiar. Have a great evening, and thank you for watching Connecticut Politics TV. For all the latest interviews and analysis with Connecticut's leaders, visit ctpolitics.tv and make sure you follow us at CT Politics TV on Twitter.